Part 16 of I'm Still Searching. My purpose for writing this is to attempt to examine several important passages in the Bible, throwing most out but keeping the precious. My purpose for writing this section is to do just that. Hold on to the precious ones dearly. I write this as I prepare to meet with my Stephen minister at Starbucks today. I continue to ask a lot of questions, and Tim is very patient with my spiritual development. Oh, by the way, what exactly is spiritual development? Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment on the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to turn a life around. Lou Buscaglia said that. That's a quote, a direct quote from the guy in California that did the love classes back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He actually had a class at USC called Love 101. What a brash and brave statement. I've always emphasized the fellowship aspect of church to my family. Maybe they are realizing how important that is to me, not necessarily the rote memorization of religion. My son willingly participates in the sharing of the peace once in a while when he goes. It's a grand effort by the family, considering we have different expectations and different viewpoints. My wife even asks me, why do I go to church if I don't believe? That's the question. The answer is in the question of searching. Does religion fill a gap in the brain, a need that needs to be satisfied, whether God exists or not? Or is it just about love of this life and this world and the intense need for friendship? I like the talking before and after the service, and of course the sharing of the peace. It is about the namaste of the experience. This is the word that Tim and I were trying to remember as we savored our caramel coffee at Starbucks. According to Wikipedia, namaste means, it's one of the few Sanskrit words commonly recognized by non-Hindu speakers. In the West, it's often used to indicate South Asian culture in general. Namaste is particularly associated with aspects of the South Asian culture, such as vegetarianism, yoga, healing, Hinduism. In recent times, and more globally, the term namaste has come to be especially associated with yoga and spiritual meditation all over the world. In this context, it has been viewed in terms of a multitude of very complicated and poetic meanings. A multitude of complicated and poetic meanings which tie with the spiritual origins of the word. Some examples: I honor the spirit in you which is also in me, attributed to Deepak Chopra. I honor the place in you in which the entire universe dwells. I honor the place in you which is of love, of integrity, of wisdom, and of peace. When you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, we are one. I salute the God within you. I recognize that we are all equal. The entire universe resides within you. The divine peace in me greets the divine peace in you. Your spirit and my spirit are one. That which is of the divine in me greets that which is the divine in you. The divinity within me perceives and adores the divinity within you. The concept of namaste means that we are infinitely respecting what is in others, the beauty they perceive, and the hopes and dreams and the innocence that still exists in their soul. In a recent Deepak Chopra book, he talks about the rose. If we perceive a beautiful rose, if we would perceive that in our mind, and not the reality, but what we perceive, our senses send signals to make it real in our mind. So literally, much of the beauty of that rose exists in our own mind. It brings up the argument of how much of the world's beauty is perception and how much is actually reality. A religious person may say that the beauty of the rose is a gift straight from God. Of course, give our complex brains some credit, right? But namaste means to respect the infinite worth in all living things, especially the God that exists or may exist in the world's most highly evolved creatures, human beings. That exists or may exist in the world's most highly evolved creatures. It is a concept like namaste that can be extremely powerful in the world. It has the potential to counteract what is worst in human beings, like war, arrogance, greed, and selfishness. It has the potential to help us see the tremendous potential in each of us to achieve peace instead of conflict, elevating our quality of life in every way on this fragile planet of ours. If I remember correctly, it was the great Gandhi who used this when greeting everyone, respecting the very best everyone brings to life. He that hath a numerous family, and many to provide for it, needs a greater providence of God. He that hath a numerous family, and many to provide for it, needs a greater providence of God. That's a quote from J.R. Taylor. And I'll write that in there because I misspelled Taylor. Providence is such a powerful concept that implies that the great life force has a sort of empathy for us, and that we are being watched and cared for. It's a very, very comfortable concept. This is what makes atheism so dangerous. That we risk bursting the bubble of people who happily and confidently believe that there's something greater, and that there's a force of some kind protecting the good, the righteous, and the ethical. It seems like a gigantic mystery, but there's certainly no scientific evidence for this being true. But it is something that many feel deep in their hearts and souls. Hardcore atheists would call providence a delusion, a simple trick we are playing on our own minds to feel safer or protect ourselves. So the atheist would say the brave thing to think is that there's nothing, and let's live with it. Let's just live with nothing. It seems like a gigantic mystery that there's certainly no scientific evidence for being true, but it is something that many feel deep in their hearts and their souls. Hardcore atheists would call providence a delusion, a simple trick we are playing on our own minds. Hardcore atheism has the potential to bring on some very heavy and possibly dangerous paradigm shifts in the minds of the believers. Maybe some huge letdowns. I guess my only advice is that we must be very courageous in the hour of our extreme uncertainty. God is nothing you can prove by science. Period. A good friend of mine recently recommended a book called A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. As one reviewer said of the book, some of Strobel's points, I think, are irrefutable. Jesus did exist. His life is much better documented than that of any figure of the same era. And he did not merely swoon on the cross, he actually died there on the cross, suffering. However, I found some of the key arguments for his divinity, resurrection, and miracles less than convincing. For instance, one of the scholars interviewed, J.P. Moreland, argues that the best circumstantial evidence for Jesus' resurrection is the conversion of an entire community of 10,000 Jews. 10,000 Jews, exactly 10,000. 10,000 Jews to Christianity within 5 weeks of crucifixion. This is all the more striking, he says, as the Jews' extremely resilient beliefs and religious practices have survived over the millennia. It seems like some directionless trip to prove some literalism of the Bible's events from a man hell-bent on making a point. Not real journalism at all, I don't think. A directionless trip to prove some literalism to make a point. It smells like a heavy dose of pseudoscience. It really, really does. It takes us back again to this point of whether I should just give up all reason and believe it. I've just picked up The Blind Watchmaker, a book written several years ago by Richard Dawkins from the local library. I like the way Dawkins writes when compared to his overly pious and serious-minded counterparts. It's more eloquent and poetic, where people like Behe and other right-wing evangelicals posting as scientists seem to be always straining to make a point and talk in less exact terms. Like the writing of Stephen Jay Gould, Bill Nye, Isaac Asimov, or Carl Sagan, it is easier to digest because it's not so pretentious. It doesn't try too hard to be good writing, if you know what I mean. Since life is too short, and I haven't finished the book yet, I will go to just the 5-star reviews of the Dawkins masterpiece. Again, it's my opinion that it's a masterpiece. This reviewer was impressed with Dawkins' honest and direct writing style. He says, "It's pretty obvious that a fair few people criticizing this book have not read it, and have no intention to read it. Or they have attempted to read it, they simply haven't grasped the most basic concepts, general assumptions that a pro-evolution stance is just an opinion, or that evolution is just a theory, a complete misunderstanding, by the way, of the meaning of the word in the scientific context. Or statements like, given enough time, dirt can turn into people, show that clearly a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding." My friend Craig uses the example of a tractor in a barn. You leave it there for 200 years, it's still going to be the same old tractor, right? Very easy for the layman to understand that. One person even takes one of the central aims of the book, where Dawkins takes Paley's watchmaker analogy and attempts to show how a complex object like an eye could evolve by selection, and berates Dawkins because he apparently doesn't grasp the fact that because a watch or a computer has a designer, that life must have a designer as well. Awe-inspiring. If I remember, he also accuses Dawkins of circular reasoning. He also accuses Dawkins of circular reasoning. What does that mean? Accusing him of really a non-scientific view, which is ironic in the deepest sense. Non-scientific reasoning would be circular. The whole case of the book is that this is all chance. This all chance thing is precisely the opposite of what Darwin and Wallace said. As Dawkins writes in the prologue, the trouble with evolution is that everyone thinks they understand it. If one thing should be taken from this book, it is the realization that natural selection is anything but chance. I used to think I understood evolution. I did biology as an elective at university, but I didn't really begin to understand the subtleties and the elegance of the theory until I first read this book 10 years ago. It's genuinely one of the milestone books of my life, and not because I already had an opinion before I read it, unlike the creationists. A reviewer of Sam Harris's book, coming up next, as I continue my essay on my search. I'm still searching.